Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Y Whales. My name is Siva Avari, managing partner of Y Whales Solutions, and I'm excited to have a great episode for you all today. I'm joined by my fantastic co-host and friend, Alan Matheson, founder of Golden Pear Capital, and our featured guest, Matt Dybel, lead head, algorithmic and research lead at Odos. Matt, great to meet you.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So let's get started. What is Odos?
Yeah, so Odos is a DEX aggregator. So we aggregate not only all the DEXs in the space, but also all the DeFi, right? So lending platforms, CDPs, collateralized debt positions, really any contract on chain where you can exchange one token for another. We seek to aggregate into one platform and then find the most efficient route from any token to another.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty intriguing on your website. I noticed that it's like Odos looks for non-linear paths to execute trades. And I do have to admit, I scratched my head a little bit until I was poking around with the product, which is really fantastic. It's really neat. But yeah, do you want to go in a little bit more into detail about, there's so many DEX aggregators out there at the moment. How is Odos different? What are the non-linear paths that I think make it really unique?
Absolutely, yeah. So that part's I think often hard to describe. It really comes down to complexity. Oftentimes, especially on these cheaper networks, the best route, the route that gets you the best price, ends up being extremely complex. And one of the reasons we started building Odos is because we found that existing solutions didn't really find these paths, right? And so we've developed a way that could find these paths, and I think that is probably best shown visually rather than just trying to describe. So maybe now can actually demo.
Maybe before you get started with that, could you maybe explain to kind of users and listeners, the traditional paths of how people are doing this today without Odos?
Absolutely, yeah. So there are other aggregators. So there are alternative platforms that go through and try to aggregate all the DEXs, and they can find routes as well between different tokens. And if the route is fairly simple, then you'll probably be fine using them. But actually, a lot of volume goes through individual DEXs. So most individual DEXs will have their own front ends that use only their pools, and a surprisingly large amount of the volume just goes through those. So the aggregator market share is actually quite small, likely just because of a lack of awareness about what it actually is and what they do.
And usually the people are aware because of their preferred DEX, basically. So I stumbled upon your website and I was poking around, and one of the thing that just jumped out to me was your visualization. I mean, not only do they look beautiful, they actually are very informative. Do you mind maybe pulling that up here and kind of walking us through what we're seeing, where that power of capability is actually a differentiator for you guys in the market?
Absolutely, yeah. So should be up now. Does everything look good?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So this is our visualization on the right here. On the left, you put in the trade. So right now, this is routing 1 ETH to DAI, and it's finding the best route on Arbitrum. And on the right, you can see our visualization, which is a Sankey diagram. So it shows the flow from ETH on the far left, all the way through all these DEXs to DAI on the right. And so each color, each little segment showing the flow is actually a swap or interaction with a contract. And the color and legend at the bottom denotes which DEX or contract it's going through.
What's the gas impact of doing so many transactions in order to get to one trade?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's a big focus of the optimization, and that's oftentimes the hardest part is taking gas into account. So we, of course, only want to utilize this extra complexity when the output net of gas is higher. So that's actually what we directly optimize for, the output net of gas. And so in this case, you're trading 1 ETH, which is worth about $2,000 right now. And this path, all these interactions cost about 77 cents. Whereas a single swap may cost 10 to 20 cents. So that
can I compare this against a single swap in this visualization?
So I mean, we can put in we can actually just switch to Ethereum. And
yeah, I was going to say, so presumably it works most effectively on like non-ETH mainnet where gas fees are lower anyway, and you have a lot more different options open to you, right?
Right. Yeah. So the biggest impact is definitely on cheaper gas chains or large trades on Ethereum.
Right.
So like if we make this a big trade, then it'll start using multiple pools again.
I see.
Here it just split it twice, so not as complex still, because ETH is of course very expensive. But even on small trades on ETH, you're still searching all these dexes, right? So you can see how many liquidity sources we have. 85 different liquidity sources we search, and so out of all those, you're getting the best price that we can find.
And so if you go back to Arbitrum, how does size impact? Like if you did 100 ETH, maybe show the viewers what that looks like as well.
So 100 ETH on Arbitrum is going to dry things up a lot. It's going to make it such that like really we only care at that point about the biggest pools, right? And so you're not seeing like as much interweaving and complexity, but you are seeing lots of pools being utilized.
There's still quite a bit. That's still quite
and there's still some complexity. It'll vary a lot depending on the current state of the market and the specific pair. There's lots of variables, of course.
And can I ask you mentioned earlier that you look not just at DEXs, but you also look at things like lending borrowing platforms. How do those types of transactions work?
Absolutely, yeah. So a lot of DeFi platforms will essentially tokenize positions within them. So Aave is one that most people are familiar with, and that's right here at the top, actually. So we can swap into Arbitrum wrapped Aave, right? So this Arbitrum wrapped Aave is Aave token that actually accumulates yield when you hold it, and so you can swap directly into it on our platform. So that would be equivalent to swapping into Aave and then going to Aave's front end and depositing into Aave. Here, it all happens in one atomic transaction, and you get out your Arbitrum wrapped Aave if you select this token as output. And if it's in a pool and you can get more output out of the pool instead of wrapping it, it'll find that as well, which is an advantage over using the front end directly. Well, in addition to being able to go from any token into it.
It's fascinating. So when did you guys launch the product, and can you talk a little bit about how it was born, why you guys decided to get into, again, quite a competitive market, and then the key use case that you were trying to solve for?
Yeah, absolutely. So the official launch was almost a year ago now, in May of last year. Launched initially on Polygon. And I think I touched on this briefly, but our reason for launching was that we noticed that existing solutions didn't really search this level of complexity, and we were able to develop a sort of proof of concept that was. And so we sort of developed that into a product that was, again, released last May, and we've been sort of building it up, adding as much liquidity as possible, adding more chains. We're now on 6 chains, and adding features as well, which we can get into.
Do you want to mention the 6 chains that you're on, and how? Yeah, and a little bit more about how the multi-chain fits into your strategy.
Absolutely, yeah. So these are the 6 chains. We have Ethereum, Optimism, BNB Chain, Polygon, Arbitrum, and Avalanche, and those are mostly the biggest EVM chains, right? So EVM allows for quicker expansion as opposed to non-EVM chains, which require a lot more work, which we may go to in the future. But initially we've been focusing on reaching these communities on the biggest EVM chains. And so we now have 6 of probably the biggest communities there live. And right now we only do swapping within one chain. We're trying to solve that problem as efficiently and well as possible. In the future, going between chains is definitely on the table as well, because that's a question we often get is like, can we do cross-chain swapping? And that's definitely something we think about and potentially will do in the future. But right now, the focus is on creating the best products to swap between 2 tokens on the same chain.
And are you adding other chains? Are you looking at, I mean, I know obviously you guys have a lot of background. We'll talk more about background, but a lot of the researchers you guys that you work with on a daily basis are quite involved in ZK. Are you looking at, for instance, ZK Sync or other chains?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking at ZK Sync. I think that one's fairly locked in for a launch at some point, depending on how things go there. There's, of course, Polygon ZK EVM and others to launch later, probably this year, like Scroll. I think all of those are definitely on the table. For us, it's really a question of how much of an ecosystem is there, how much of a DeFi ecosystem is there, because Odos provides more and more value the more robust and complex the DeFi ecosystem is. And so we prioritize launch on chains once they have that in place.
Just dumb question.
Also, of course, I was just going to say it speaks to number of users as well. But yeah.
I was going to say, dumb question, but are you guys kind of like evaluating those chains based off of TVL? How much is actually moving there and optimizing, making sure you're capturing your product to account for all of that?
Yeah, so TVL is often like the simplest sort of metric you can look at, right? And like these 6 are pretty much the top 6 by TVL, because TVL it's definitely not a perfect metric, but it does often correlate to sort of overall activity and diversity of the ecosystem.
I mean, you need good solid DEX volume, right? You need volume across different venues in order to get the most out of your out of the tech you built, right? And I know that like some of the ZKs at the moment, still just don't have even a decent number of tokens, native tokens, which is, I guess, chicken and egg kind of scenario.
Right. So, I mean, like we can launch on any EVM chain, right? You're just going to get like paths like we saw on Ethereum, except it's not because gas is expensive. It's just because there's not really that many options to search, right? So
yeah, exactly.
That's really the trade-off.
I know a big, worry for a lot of noobs, I guess we can qualify them when they start getting into the world of DeFi, and especially with DEX aggregators, is how do I maintain full custody or control of my funds during a swap? How are you guys addressing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge, that's one of the biggest value propositions of DEXs in general, right? Is that you never lose custody. You never have to trust us or anyone to hold your funds, right? So you execute one transaction, it goes from your wallet, goes through all of these exchanges, it goes through a final check to make sure that you got out what you were promised, and then it goes back into your wallet. And all of that is like one executed all or nothing chunk of code. And so as long as that check happens at the end, you're guaranteed exactly whatever you're signing, whatever exchange you're signing is going to happen or not happen. And that's extremely valuable, especially in the context of all the centralized platforms that are misappropriating users' funds and going under.
Can you talk a little bit about how you guys, as researchers in the space, on the front lines, how do you guys think about MEV, and how does MEV play into the diagram? Like, where's the bot in the in your diagram? No, I'm joking, of course, but I mean, talk to us a little bit about like how you view MEV and your product.
Absolutely, yeah. So MEV is definitely a huge sort of component to DeFi and the crypto ecosystem in general, and it affects trades to a very large extent. And so we are definitely looking into ways to, specifically to make that experience better for our users. And we have a couple things in the pipeline there to make sure, for instance, slippage is set correctly, or to potentially make using private relays easier. Because you can, of course, do that now, but the UX is really terrible, right? You have to open up MetaMask, go to the network, and like switch out your RPC. And in reality, no one really does that, even though they can, right? So we're looking into ways.
That's a big point you just touched on, especially again as you're exploring this space. The user experience is just it's complicated, it's convoluted, and so what have you done to optimize for that to promote a much better user experience?
Yeah, so one is I think this visualization is a component, right? Showing what's happening in hopefully a way that's visually appealing, but also actually shows you what's going on in a way that you can kind of just look at this and get a high level intuition of the flow of where your money's going. That's sort of just a nice to have. The actual swap flow is something we've definitely focused on a lot. So making sure that the UI is fairly simple. There's some information that needs to be there that is useful, but cutting down on extra information has been a big focus. And then just making the whole swap flow as simple and easy as possible. And we're, of course, constrained by third-party applications we rely on, like wallets, that often make that process a lot harder. And that's we don't have a lot of control there, other than like making our own wallet, which is unfortunate. But we can definitely continue to improve in all of those areas, and that's definitely extremely important, I would say.
Well, I mean, hopefully with ERC 4337, wallet abstraction, account abstraction does improve the wallet experience, but I totally agree. But coming back to that, like the user experience, as Siva mentioned, I run a crypto hedge fund. And one of the things is, especially when you're dealing in size, inevitably you end up with like dust in your wallet. And I thought that was one of the really cool applications that you've built, is that you can do multi-token swap for multi-tokens. So you can run both sides of that, but even just sweeping up the dust, I thought it was a brilliant use case. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe if it's doable, you can show us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So those are some of the most significant features, I think, that we're the first platform to offer, is multi-input and multi-output swaps. So that is taking multiple tokens and trading those all in one transaction into one token, or you can also trade into multiple tokens. And so we have these two buttons here where you can select more tokens on our UI to swap. So we can go in and we can just select some random tokens, right? And it will route all of those tokens into our Aave wrapped ARB in this case.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. It's great. Oh. I mean, it saves a lot of time and energy when you're doing your wallet cleanup exercises.
Yeah, and you can see here the GNS is way smaller, so that's sort of the dust clean out, right? Which helps on Ethereum, because you may have some random token that's going to take multiple hops to get to a token you actually want, and you can just add that into an actual swap and sort of just have it join up and into this final Aave wrapping in this case, but really any operation.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And then we can also look at we can wait to move on to that.
I was just going to say, how do you guys account for like slippage, for example? How are you guaranteeing that, a lot of times, I'm taking the face value of the rate that I'm seeing on the aggregator, how am I guaranteeing that I'm getting that best rate, for example, and, the slippage between that?
Yeah. So one thing we show on our UI, again, we're trying to minimize the information, but like you said, it's very useful information to sort of have an idea of sort of the rate you're getting. And so we show this number here, which shows sort of the delta in value. So right here, it's minus 0.8%. So basically the value of the output is minus 0.8% from the value of the inputs. And that takes into account any liquidity provider fees you're paying, or any price impact you're causing, or just deltas in starting prices. And so that sort of gives you a high level idea of, is this actually like a good rate, or am I trading an illiquid token that's causing a huge amount of price impact and giving me a much worse rate than I should be getting?
I guess linked to that, and another thing that I thought was really interesting that you guys have done, and I know it's not your core, but I thought it'd be really neat for viewers to take a look at, is your arbitrage project, I guess. I just thought it was fascinating. Can you maybe speak a little bit to that, and maybe you can show it as well? I'm as a hedge fund, I was like, "Whoa, this is cool."
Yeah, so that's sort of we can switch over to that. So that's sort of what. Oh, it didn't switch. I'll have to switch over to that. So this is sort of MEV in general. We talked about improving the UX of MEV on the actual platform. The other aspect of MEV is just like actual capture or participation in it in some way. And that sort of interest in that is sort of what kicked off this exploration in some ways. So Odos sort of, or our entry into DeFi from sort of the other activities we were doing in the crypto space was sort of arbitrage, right? So we can, there's all these decentralized exchanges, and you can do some really neat things sort of exactly. And there's a lot of qualities of blockchain that make it really interesting compared to traditional finance, where at least to me, it seems very opaque and hard to sort of participate in. You need a lot of infrastructure and such to participate in it there. But within DeFi, you can really sort of get all the information. Everyone's on a level playing field. And then there's very cool tools like flash loans, where you can get the capital you need to collect the profits, get the starting capital to execute an arbitrage path. And so all of that led to sort of in parallel to building this order routing product, we also sort of started exploring arbitrage. We did some single chain arbitrage, but then we got interested in this idea of cross-chain arbitrage, which seemed much more untapped because there's a lot of challenges and issues when trying to capture that. Mm-hmm. But that's sort of been an ongoing research project in addition to building this main Odos order routing product. Has been building this sort of arbitrage tracking research tool. And so that's what you're seeing right here now. So this is running across 8 chains right now, pictured here. And so we track, specifically this is limited to Unity V2 clones because it allows for some significant optimizations in terms of the route finding and arbitrage calculation. So it's calculating, I believe it's right here, 34.8 million linear paths. So like we said, we focus on nonlinear paths for Odos because you can get a lot of gains there. But for cross-chain arbitrage, when the difference is also often in a specific token or a specific pool, a linear path is often a very useful beginning to sort of calculate that. So that's what this tool focuses on here. And so it's running live. You can always check it out, and it shows the gross profit before gas, which is an important sort of clarifier, right? But the gross profit before gas of executing this route through these dexes. And so this one is $4. A lot of swaps on Ethereum, so you'd probably spend more than $4 in gas, which is an important clarifier and probably why it's still sitting here. The ones that are pretty big do go away, of course, because someone captures it one way or another, but it is surprising sometimes how long they stick around. And so we have this leaderboard section, which is perhaps more interesting. And this shows sort of the highest ones that have been calculated. So this one is between BNB and Phantom, and you could have made a $400 profit swapping in these two pools earlier today. We also have the week, where I guess not much has happened this week because the top opportunity is the same. But we also have all time, and that's where some of the really big opportunities come in. So this one actually
is this capturing a trade that's already happened, or a theoretical time point, a timestamp of when it would have been most optimal to execute upon?
Right. Yeah, that's an important clarification as well. This is all just calculated arbitrage, so it's not captured. It was likely captured by someone, maybe not in this exact way. Eventually it went away, so someone swapped in those pools and sort of equalized them, but this is the optimal way to calculate arbitrage for this specific path. So there's to clarify, there's depending on the path, there's an optimal input through that path that maximizes your arbitrage profit. And so that's what this is calculating.
I look forward to the trade now button when you can trade your 77,000 DAI for the 630,000 DAI. Do you want to execute this trade? Yes, please. Boop. Done.
I know. I'm just I'm hoping you just click this right now so I can.
Yeah, just text me, man. Text me when it's ready, please.
Yeah. So there's that's something we hear a lot because, of course, that would be great, right? And it's something we're actively looking into, either capturing it ourselves because we're not right now. We're just tracking it, or productizing it in some way so that people with capital, since you can't use flash loans here on cross-chain trades, you need capital. And that's one of the main challenges. So potentially it could be productized towards that. There's a lot of challenges with that, right? One challenge is that only one person gets it. So if you're productizing it, you can only sell it to one person. You could have an auction of some sort maybe, but at the end of the day, only one person is going to actually purchase it. So it's not super scalable in that respect. And it's hard to guarantee the user experience because
you could fund a pool.
What?
You can fund a pool where the capital gets used.
Yeah, so that's one interesting idea is having people fund pools and then we execute it and then give the profits out to the LPs. That's one direction we have explored and probably will continue exploring.
But then that probably raises an interesting question then, right? Because now you're starting to get into securities, exchanges and that fun discussion. And as we know, the current environment, there's, let's just say the regulators are on a warpath, right?
Yeah, always a fun discussion. We definitely discuss that often, and how that affects us. It's not really clear at this point in a lot of ways, but certainly sort of capturing arbitrage ourselves and productizing that in some way, I think, increases risks in that category. So that's absolutely another consideration there.
So how often, if I may ask, presumably you've been in the process of designing, launching, having Odos for 18 months. To what degree do regulators influence your design decisions now versus 18 months ago?
Yeah, so most of the focus up to now has just been building the best product. I think more and more we're starting to think about that aspect of things. And so there may be, I think, more and more we're definitely going to be taking that side of things into account, I think, I would say.
And if I may, is that multi-jurisdictional discussion? are you discussing just in a context of American regulators, or are you looking at overseas regulators as well in some of your design discussions?
Yeah, so we're a US based company, so it's and American regulators seem to be the most aggressive at this point in time. So the focus is definitely on that. But certainly regulations outside of the US are also a consideration to a lesser extent, I would say.
I mean, it's such a pervasive topic.
Yeah.
And yet, I think one of the things that we see is that a lot of teams are considering, some degree of regulatory arbitrage as well. Just talking about arbitrage, there's also regulatory arbitrage. You don't need the same kind of flowchart for that, but
Right.
but it's also, I think, a topic that's influencing actual design decisions and structuring decisions and all the rest of it. So.
Since Odos is an aggregator and you're dealing with multiple tokens here, do you have to address issues such as like network congestion? When we start thinking about HFT, high frequency trading environment, fulfillment of orders in a linear fashion, or single threading, multicasting, blah 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 blah. How do you guys kind of compensate or adjust for those variables?
Yeah, so of course we're reliant on the network that the person is swapping on and utilizing Odos on for the actual finality, inclusion, execution of the trades. We definitely do have to deal with the ramifications of that. And so a big part of that is the gas price, right? That's really oftentimes what has the biggest effect on inclusion and speed of inclusion. And so setting that is definitely something that we keep a good eye on. And we definitely, I would say, err on the side of a slightly more aggressive gas price, because paying a little bit more for gas is often worth it to get a higher chance of a higher speed of inclusion. So on networks where there's some uncertainty, which is pretty much every L1, L2 is often now more and more are trying to like normalize the gas price, which is great. So it's usually constant on like Arbitrum, for example, but on L1s, it fluctuates a lot, right? And so we definitely err on the side of a more aggressive gas price to get traders included quicker, because that minimizes slippage and all the other negative externalities that occur.
Yeah, and I think like ERC 4884, which should be later this year, I think, should also help with that kind of regulation, right?
Yeah.
Of gas prices.
You had mentioned earlier, Odos is one of a couple of projects that you guys have been working on. Can you kind of tell us about that background? I believe you're part of Semiotic Labs, what Semiotic Labs is, what you guys work on, what are some of the other projects that you've developed or have had a hand in, and then why you decided to double down on Odos as your product strategy or go-to-market strategy.
Absolutely, yeah. So Odos is a product of Semiotic Labs, as you stated, and Semiotic Labs right now works on two main projects. One is Odos and one is the graph. So Semiotic Labs is a core developer for the graph. So we now work on the core development of features in the graph, and that's sort of what one half of the company does. And that was sort of the birthplace of Odos to some extent as well, right? So Semiotic Labs started in the crypto space by primarily just working on the graph, and that gave an opportunity to sort of explore the crypto space and try to find some product that brings value to the crypto space. And we've found that in Odos and now have been sort of growing that as a separate project. I guess I can speak a little bit to what we do for the graph. We do artificial intelligence and cryptography, which is mainly ZK Snarks right now, research for the graph. And the various components there. There's a very complex crypto economic sort of system that decentralizes the graph, and there's many AI problems within that need solving. And there's, of course, many applications of snarks to making the data indexing and retrieval more trustless. So those are sort of the two areas we focus on there.
Why the graph? What attracted you guys to the graph as a project to get involved in?
Yeah, so I mean, the graph is an extremely vital piece of infrastructure, right? So like the infrastructure they built with the subgraphs and the indexing, it's something every project needs, right? And in some cases, they're not using the graph directly, but they're using the technology that the graph built because the graph is all open source and decentralized and stuff. So it's an extremely vital, that tech stack is an extremely vital part of the crypto sort of projects and everything. So it's definitely something we're excited to be working on.
And maybe we could back up a little bit. Like, how did you get your start? Both, like, I mean, professionally with Semiotic. Tell us a little bit more about your own background. We plugged straight in the product, rushed straight in it's such an interesting, intriguing, visually stimulating product that we skipped over your own story.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in artificial intelligence. That's sort of what got me sort of very interested in computing and programming in general. And so a large amount of my background is studying different areas of artificial intelligence. Spent some time in NLP with transformers, working with transformers before like GPT and stuff today obviously is becoming a huge thing. Also done a good bit of reinforcement learning. So that's sort of the subfield of AI where you have some objective that you are trying to get an agent, an actor to optimize and maximize. And how do we build algorithms to actually do that? And so that track sort of led to eventually working with Semiotic Labs on the graph and the AI problems in that crypto economic environment that I mentioned. And so that was sort of my entry from AI into crypto, and now sort of from there into DeFi, right? More generally, once we sort of created this Odos product.
You went the opposite way. You went from AI to crypto degen, whereas I think a lot of people are doing the reverse path at the moment. But that's really fascinating. Yeah. It's really fascinating about talking about the agents. I was just reading about some crypto applications of agents and reinforced learnings. It's fascinating. How do you think that AI will in time impact crypto?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of potential overlap there. I think there's a lot of ways that can't really be known right now, but there's some more obvious ones. So like one is the actual applications we're working on right now, where you have these complex crypto economic systems, right? A lot of crypto is about building incentives to trustlessly get actors and participants to do what you want them to do. And that sort of parallels reinforcement learning very well, because reinforcement learning is studying once you have this objective that you want to maximize or this behavior you want to instill in actors, how do you sort of design an algorithm to do that? And sort of related, how do you design those objectives in the first place such that actors are incentivized to do that? So that's like direct applications of RL right now. I think there's certainly more sort of future-looking things like combining sort of AI and blockchain more directly, which I don't know if I can speak as much about as far as how realistic that is. It's definitely very interesting. I think one thing that has come up a bit is like proving the predictions from an AI network. So using snarks with a neural net to sort of say, this is what this AI model thinks about this, and we can actually prove that that's what they think, or proving some other aspect of the AI training pipeline. So that I think is very interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Since you're an AI expert, I'm going to throw you kind of a little curveball here, but where do you see AI and LLMs kind of impacting the TradFi space, or potential, low hanging fruit opportunities for a lot of these traditional institutions to start playing around with that technology?
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, LLMs have sort of already exceeded my expectations. I didn't think that you could sort of reach this level of performance with sort of that technology. So anything's game at this point. I know there's a model in relation to TradFi specifically. Bloomberg has made a model that I haven't looked at too deeply, but I know it's specifically pre-trained on financial things and can then perform extremely well on financial things. And I think, once you have this massive model that has some level of general performance, you can really do a lot with it once you can pre-train it on specific tasks. So that's sort of definitely something Semiotic is interested in general as well, in addition to or in combination with the graph.
So this is great, Matt. I mean, I love what I've been seeing. So what else is coming down the pipe? What's some Odos alpha that you can drop on us here that, for example, like myself, and I know definitely Alan is probably going to play around with your product. And as we kind of get deeper and deeper to it, we kind of want to see where you guys are going, kind of what's rolling out here in the near future.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can definitely expect to see the SOR platform continue to grow. More chains, more dexes, more features likely there. One other big thing we're working on and we'll be rolling out more widely soon is a pricing service. So we already track all these dexes, all this DeFi. Like I said, literally every way you can sort of convert one token to another on chain. And right now we find SOR paths between any two given tokens, but oftentimes you want to know just like what is the value of one token. And so we're going to be building out this service that gives that value, right? So it looks at all the pools we track, and using all of that information, it sort of computes one value for that token.
Is it value? Sorry, just to clarify, is it value, or like you could pull other data like depth of liquidity? That information is also quite interesting, I think, for us when we take a position. We're like, well, how much are we going to move the price, or could we? Liquidity problems getting in and out or whatever.
Yeah, so I think the price is just the beginning. I think that's going to come first, but we're also going to continue building out sort of a suite of DeFi data products, right? Because again, we have all these things tracked, sort of, I would say the most extensive tracking of DeFi platforms, and we definitely want to provide not only those prices, but in-depth pool information, some of which can potentially tie back into SOR for liquidity depth for a specific pair that might be best calculated by just sort of getting SOR paths at different input amounts. But we also definitely want to, we're going to continue looking into how to best package up all of this DeFi we're tracking and providing access to it through data APIs.
That's cool. Who would be the end consumer of that data, you think?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of different parties depending on what subset of that you're interested in. I think I focused on those like single price value numbers because that's sort of that's very widely used already, right? So there's lots of sites that show that you go to a specific token and oftentimes you just want to know what's the value, right? And then if you know how many tokens, you can know the market cap. You can get lots of interesting information from that. So that I see extremely wide use for. Specific pool data and other derivative API products, as you mentioned, hedge funds or other platforms might be interested in. Anyone taking large positions or studying or using DeFi in any way will I think be interested in these sort of statistics and information about the DeFi they're using.
Yeah, fair.
Well, and that's an interesting point you just made. You have the degens like Alan and the OGs that this is a no brainer. But what are some of the hurdles that you think not only in the DeFi space and it's more specifically in leveraging DEXs and aggregators and stuff like this, but also just to get more of a retail audience interested in products like these? What do you think are some of the hurdles that need to be resolved here to get, what we think of like more counterparty volume, more volume in general traded on these platforms?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that goes back to the UX, right? Making the UX as good as possible. A lot of it is just going to take time, I think, sort of getting more integrated, more adoption. There's sort of a lot of network effects involved in getting people to use what other people are using, right? So I think all of that is going to be important to continue to grow sort of retail adoption in addition to these more institutional or degen use cases.
Hey, if there was a button I could click to execute that $411 profit right there, then I think that's a great example of a simple UX, a single single call to action, right?
Yeah.
No.
If only it was that simple.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Well, we've got a lot of investors here that listen to this call. We've got a lot of TradFi, institutional players that are huge Y whalers and part of the community. How do they get in touch with you? How do they participate in probably being involved with Odos? Tell us kind of that formal pathways.
Absolutely, yeah. So we are planning on probably raising soon. There aren't a lot of details I can share with that right now, but it would be great for anyone interested to get in touch so we could explore further. We have a general purpose contact address at abc@odos.xyz. So you can definitely use that email address, or you can contact me directly at matt@semiotic.ai. So both of those emails will work well for contact. You can also follow along on Twitter at Odos Protocol is the Odos Twitter account, and at Matt Deibel is my personal account.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt. We appreciate you being on the call. I mean, I'm just the visualization alone. The minute I saw that, I'm like, man, we need to talk to this guy because he's doing something that, Alan and I do a lot of crypto workshops and a lot of in-person events, especially at chapters around the country. And, when we're showing things, just to show the power of something like that, really, I think is an inflection moment in a lot of people's brains, the power of Web3 and kind of the net new capabilities that are coming to bear. So really, really love kind of what you guys are building here with Odos. And, don't tell my wife this, but, I'll probably deploy some money here and play around with it tonight. And, we'll get involved here, and hopefully the listeners here will get involved. And thank you, Alan, for participating. It's always good talking to you.
Yeah, it's great. It was fun. Congratulations, Matt. It's a great product, and really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.